I thought it might be nice just before we kind of talk about leadership, just to tell us a little bit about Gusto. And we were talking backstage, and Gusto now serves, he said they hit a milestone, they now serve 1% of all companies in America. So I thought it'd be nice just to say a little bit about that, and then we can move into some of the explorations on leadership.
Yeah, I mean, really thrilled to be here, and hopefully excited to share some lessons. But what we do at Gusto, we're privileged, honored to serve small business, and we help them with things like payroll, health insurance, HR, really trying to help these small businesses that inherently care a lot about people focus more on their people, since historically there's been a lot of headache and hassle with things like tax filings and insurance enrollment. So our mission is to help make their life easier, make it better, and we are honored to be at that milestone now, 1%, 60,000 plus companies use Gusto. But it is a team effort. We are over 500 Gusties. And
500 Gusties?
That's what we call ourselves. Okay. I did not create that, but it's happy to perpetuate it. But we call ourselves Gusties. Yeah.
Great. So we're here talking about leadership and what it means to be a leadership. And when I emailed you, inviting you, when Scott and I kind of came up with this title, you came right to mind, because I'm like, he's running, in some ways, a very traditional company, a very non-traditional company. And how you embody leadership to me is very refreshing. So I'm wondering if maybe we could start by just like, how do you look at leadership? Do you even see yourself as a leader, or how do you orient around the fact that you're the CEO and there's over 500 Gusties? How do you see yourself in relationship to them? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, the title of the conference, right, it's the New Leaders Summit. I was thinking a lot about that word, and I think it is something every person defines in their own way. For me, the first word that came to mind was being of service. And so, we are of service to our customer. Being CEO means I'm of service to my team. And I really like to think about our growth as, 3 became 4, 4 became 5, 5 became 6. But what is the role of a CEO, I think, is another question, which is how does that evolve? Early on, I definitely wore a lot of hats. I joke that part of my job these days is to fire myself from as many jobs as I can. I used to run our marketing team, our sales team, our ops team, our biz team. And now we have some pretty amazing leaders in those roles. But it's almost the inverse then. What do I do? And I spent a lot of time there. And my conclusion is a lot of that is still the same as from day one. I'm a steward of our purpose as a company, what goal we have, and then many touch points, which I'm sure we'll get into. But in particular, I'm still very involved in hiring and the way we make offers, the way we onboard new employees to the company, because it does come back to being all about people.
But people also look to you to set the vision and the direction and to solve problems and to answer questions. How do you deal with that? Like, Josh, what should we do? Do you have an answer, or do you just kind of say, well, we're here to figure that out? And
people would be frustrated if I only gave that answer. We did our kickoff for the new year. We have a fiscal year that starts in May, and that was on Wednesday. I did an all hands. And I would call that our due north. What is our purpose as a company? And for us, and I think for other companies that call themselves mission-driven, my definition of that is not really about us as much as what we think we can do for the customer. And we have a set of principles, a set of views on, again, for our product, our space, how employees interact, what it takes to build a company, how you enable people to go do great work. And ultimately, that is a belief, right? It's only proven true until we actually go make it real in the world for hopefully millions of companies. But a lot of that is what I am definitely the steward of, the guardian of, and whenever there's questions related to it, I help us navigate that journey. A lot of that today manifests in the context of things like annual planning, quarterly planning, really big, broader topics and direction-related questions. But from a day-to-day standpoint, happily, I trust the team. And empower them to make those decisions. So
you make as few decisions as possible.
Day-to-day, as few as possible, but then the big ones that matter are ultimately always going to be on my plate.
Right. And so you've grown, I think we were talking in 2014, you had 50 teams.
Yeah, about 50 people.
50, and now you're over 550. Yeah. How have you kind of navigated that growth, and how have you kind of maintained a culture within that growth that you feel like is aligned with the values?
Yeah, and I don't know if folks are as familiar. We have some unique parts of our culture. One that we were joking about earlier, but one of the traditions at Gusto is we take our shoes off in the office. So yes, all 500 plus people walk around with their socks on or their slippers. And that tradition was not one that we created kind of strategically. It was an evolution of starting the company in a house. I was raised that way. My co-founders were raised that way. And so I think scaling is an interesting question and puzzle. Like, traditions should be natural. They should be organic. In this case, this tradition is one that now is not just mine. It's the whole company's, and I couldn't probably change it if I wanted to.
You couldn't be like, hey, guys, we're going to wear shoes now.
No, exactly, right? That's just a part of now who we are, and we don't expect all companies to do that, but it is a Gusto quirk. But when it comes to things like values, we hire for a very specific set of alignment around values, motivation. Those are things that we've had to scale through a number of changes in process. I used to make every offer in the company. I used to interview every candidate. That's obviously not scalable. I did that up through about 50, 60 people. Today we have a whole program that we call the Watermelon Program that's focused on basically an interview that is purely only focused on values and motivation alignment. And we have people that get peer nominated to that group. I do a training with them every 6 months. And so that's been one example of
nothing technical.
Yeah, no, it's not a technical interview at all.
Cultural and values-based.
It's purely focused on alignment. I think if that's one thing that I'd love to share as a tip, it's to think of hiring as alignment. It's never about companies convincing someone to join or a candidate convincing you to hire them. It's both parties trying to figure out, can we go do something amazing together? And so in that context, one of the biggest pitfalls, I think, is to only focus on experience or skill set. Yes, there's a need. Yes, there's a skill. But things like values and motivation, two very different buckets, I think are equally important. And we've tried to structure an interview process to capture that, even though I cannot be a part of that interview anymore, myself personally.
So what would some of the questions be if I was being interviewed and you were trying to assess whether I had aligned values with the company? What would you ask me? What matters to you, Soren? Or
literally, it's a conversation. It
Okay.
feels very different. There is no right or wrong answer. Okay. And if someone's not aligned with Gusto's values, they're not a bad person.
Right.
They're just not aligned with the way that we approach the way we work. But our values are things like being a builder, biasing towards transparency, having long-term focus, having service mindset, lack of ego, intellectual curiosity. So honestly, we might end up just talking about your last weekend or a project you're working on, and I might, through that, discover the way you collaborate, the way that you make decisions, the way that you delegate, the way that you trust others, the way that you applaud the effort of others, and see if that's aligned with our focus on those topics.
But it's partly, for lack of a better word, like an energetic, like if I came there and said, listen, I have no ego, I get along great with people, I'm a total builder, I'm perfect.
It's definitely much more of a show, not tell.
Yeah.
I would ask you, tell me about a big project you did last year. Wisdom 2.0, the big conference.
Yeah.
How did you navigate that?
Okay.
How did you make a decision on who to be involved in what? And
okay.
If you all of a sudden start going, well, it's really about me getting famous, I would have been like,
right.
That seems like a bad reason.
Because people can say all kinds of answers if they think they, to try to fit into whatever bucket somebody might have. But you guys try and get kind of beyond that.
Yeah, and I think that's the heart of great face-to-face, especially interview communication is you can pretty quickly figure out if someone's really authentic and speaking from the heart and less from the head. I mean, I think interviewing where you're trying to think about what's the right answer versus just authentically sharing and being open and vulnerable. And we try to do what we can to give people that platform. So before people come to interview in the company, we prep them, tell them who they're going to be speaking with, make sure there's as little doubt as possible on the way the day is going to be navigated, so that ultimately we try to just help them feel safe enough just to speak their mind, right? Be themselves, because that's really what you want an interview to be all about. Is just
and they don't want a job where they're not aligned either. So you both have the same goal.
Well, same for the interviewer, right? The goal is always to just to be authentic.
That's great. One of the things I was fascinated by was you were an intern at, I forget the name of the company, but you invited every member of the board of that company out to lunch. Is this true?
I think sometimes these stories get elevated, but I was directionally accurate. I was an intern my freshman year in college at Intel, just down in Santa Clara, and
which had probably tens and thousands of employees.
Yeah, large company, amazing place to work. I was working in the fab. I put on the bunny suit, so you go into the fab and look at all these cool tools. I was just blown away, and I did ask a bunch of the leadership, a bunch of executives, just a quick email one by one. Do you have 15 minutes to chat? I'd love to just get your advice, understand, what decisions you made to end up where you are today, what excites you, and what you do on a daily basis. And
sign Josh the intern?
Yeah, I was very proud. I was very open. I'm an intern in the company. I'm 18. I'm a freshman. I'm studying electrical engineering, or I think I will be studying electrical engineering. And do you have the time? And that's a tip, I think, not just that applies to students. I think a lot of times, we can get in our own way all too often about what we think is possible, whether it's through sending an email to someone and having a conversation, or even just in challenging the status quo and thinking about a way to do things differently. And there's a great quote video from Steve Jobs that I play for all of our new hires every 2 weeks. That's all about how the world around us is not created by anyone that's better, smarter, different than you. It's just people choosing to do stuff with their time. And I find that really empowering. I didn't see that quote till 6 years ago, but I guess as an 18-year-old, I was somewhat acting upon that same impulse.
But you had this sense even then of like, why not make an invitation and see what happens? You didn't think like, well, I'm just an intern, I'm going to be bothering them. You had some gusto, if you will, or something that like propelled you to do that. I think that's rare, and I was curious about that quality.
I would say it probably came from my parents. I mean, my parents are both teachers. My dad was a high school teacher in San Francisco Unified School District for 20 plus years, and then taught at San Quentin, working with the inmates for 10 years. And my mom was a Spanish and French teacher. And they're both
from Guatemala or
Bolivia.
Bolivia.
Yeah. So they're both the first to go to college in their family. They both moved thousands of miles away from home to create a new life for themselves. So I would define that as entrepreneurship, and if they can do that, then I can send an email.
And what have been some of the key lessons? Like if you could talk to yourself, and maybe there's not much, but like if you know now, what you know now could apply to kind of what you knew when you were first starting companies, first kind of building teams. Are there particular things that you would think of saying to that 18-year-old or 19-year-old self?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, first, we're all on a journey to get better, improve. So there's a ton of things 2 years from now I'm going to tell myself today that I could do better, different. But one that I would share with everyone is kind of related to my last startup experience. I'll summarize that really quick and then share the lesson. But I had a company that I worked on from 2008 to 2010, and we ended up selling that company, and then with different founders started Gusto in 2011. And that company was one where we ended up starting to build apps, and it was all kind of related to the broader social platforms, Twitter, Facebook at the time. And we had a lot of ad revenue, but there really wasn't a problem we were trying to tackle. We were just optimizing on how to make more ad revenue. And although we were making a bunch of revenue, it really felt very empty. Like, what is our purpose? What is our due north? Where do we go 5, 10, 20 years from now? When I want to talk to people and evangelize, am I eager to say what I'm doing, or am I in stealth, which is usually a kind of a dangerous position to be in, because especially as a founder, as an entrepreneur, you want to be almost annoyingly trumpeting what you're doing every day, all day, to everyone you know, because you care about it so much.
Versus saying, what are you doing? Saying, I optimize ad revenue. It doesn't feel as exciting.
It didn't feel like a purpose. And I think, at least for what I realized after that, and I went through a couple months of introspection, and we're probably going to talk a bit about introspection and how powerful it is, I realized that what was missing was starting with the problem, and how important it is for me to really view my purpose as trying to fix something. I like fixing stuff. I like making things better. I like having customers say thank you, and knowing that we're actually making something really hard, difficult in their life better. And so my tip and my advice to any aspiring entrepreneur, perhaps, is if you're starting a business, imagine it's the 10,000th time describing what you're doing. Will you be as authentically and sincerely excited as the first time? Because at that point, you can't fake it. It has to be authentic. And with Gusto, I'm honored and privileged to talk about what we're tackling, because I hope to spend the rest of my life doing it. It's probably my millionth time describing Gusto.
Yeah.
It's a joy to do it. That was not the case with my last company. So that'd be the advice I would give myself if I could go back in time.
Right. And you had said before, since while we're on it, like that the number one quality for you in terms of leadership is introspection. So maybe we can talk about why that is and what that is to you, at least.
Yeah, I think introspection, I guess 2 parts to it, like the why and then the how. I think the why is there's always a million things to do, right? And whether that's in business or in personal life, success is not having a million things to do. Success is deciding which one to focus on today, tomorrow, the next day, and then how do you define what you're trying to work towards. Otherwise, you don't know if you're making progress. And I don't know any other way to prioritize, simplify, focus on which things matter without taking the time to think about it, go inside myself, and kind of process that. And sometimes it can be more external facing, but for me, like going and gardening, going on a run, going into nature, going hiking are kind of my really important sources of detaching, usually not with a cell phone or a smartphone. And so that's why I think introspection is so important. And for the how, I already, I guess, alluded to it. definitely nature is a big one. And then we have an office in Denver that we opened about 3 years ago. I go there monthly to spend time with the team. And
did you choose Denver because of the nature around it, or there was a middle of the country?
Yeah, we wanted kind of more in the middle of the country. We wanted it to be day trip accessible. We wanted it to be a place a lot of talent was already moving. A lot of people were excited to live in. We did like the nature, the mountains, the outdoors aspects. But when I go there, it's all about visiting the team. But then selfishly, it's kind of a retreat every time I go. Like the flight's a retreat. The few days I'm there and going on a run and trying to really detach from normally what's happening in San Francisco is a great place of
you get
introspection.
Some space from it. Great. And I also know you took a bus trip. Can you say a little bit about that? Was it after the election, or it was unrelated to the election? I don't know, but
I think everything is related in some way. Right? We only are ourselves, I guess, just to get philosophical. We don't have professional, personal work selves, in my opinion. It's just who you are. So what I did last year was, and I encourage all CEOs to do this if they want to be connected to their customers as much as they can. I actually just wanted to visit our customers more. And we have customers all over the country, in every state, every city, every county. And so my chief of staff and I got in an RV and drove 4,000 miles to Jacksonville, Florida, and just met customers along the way for 2 weeks. And really the goal was to get out of the echo chamber, get out of the kind of bubble I've grown up in. I've been in the Bay Area my whole life. I was born in San Francisco, grew up in Marin, went to Stanford, and now live in San Francisco. So it was something
There's a whole other country. I don't know if you've heard.
There's a whole other world.
There's
And so it was just a great way, whether it's through a bus trip, travel. I think travel itself is a great mechanism to get into a different perspective, state of mind. We actually codified some of that into our company tradition. So everyone at Gusto on their 1-year anniversary gets a free plane ticket anywhere in the world.
Oh, wow. In the world?
Yeah.
OK. Wow. Round trip or one way?
Round trip.
Round trip, OK.
But it expires on your 2nd-year anniversary. And the entire catalyst was just trying to figure out a way to separate or celebrate this milestone moment, and then encourage someone to detach, step back, because we wanted them to get even more ready and prepared for what's to come in startup life, which is a lot. And travel was always the way we did that, so this was our way to. We can't force people to travel, but we can.
Yeah, what percent? Is there a percentage who don't use that?
No.
Okay, I was about to say that would be. I don't be suspicious of that person. So you have created this culture. You've created this business. It feels like, in many ways, you're living like kind of the entrepreneur's dream in some ways, because like your company's like valued this large valuation. You've got a great team. What is it like to be on the other side of that? Do you feel like, oh, I've made it? Do you feel like, wow, we've reached this huge 1%, so like we should be happy? How do you deal with this place of contentment and ambition? Can you hold both, or does one take over, or how does that work for you?
So I was talking to someone last week about this, and they were asking, how do you feel? Because we were starting a new year, and I guess the easiest way I can answer it is I feel 2 things at all times, and I think probably I'm not the only one. Maybe many of you feel the same way, because we all have a lot to be grateful for, frankly. So I feel a lot of gratitude, a lot of pride. The 500 people that have chosen to join and make this journey their own is incredible. I feel honored to have them made that choice. And I feel even more grateful for the 60,000 customers that trust us with really important stuff, like getting their employees paid on time and setting up health insurance for their kids. And so that's a wonderful grounding effect. And then I equally feel a lot of eagerness and a lot of impatience to go help another 1 million customers and actually even do more of what we in our heads think is really inevitable and what the future looks like, but make it real faster. And I'd rather be impatient than complacent, but it is a dangerous kind of, but a healthy tension. I mean, if I swing too far in one direction, I think it can be quite problematic. I try not to be stressed, because really there's just a lot to be grateful for in life.
Yeah, totally.
If I ever feel that way, I just tell myself, first world problems.
Well, there is this like scenario where there's somebody who builds a company, they sell it, and then like they take 2 weeks off and they're building another company. And it's like there's this Silicon Valley like work ethic that I sometimes am curious about. Like what's wrong with just being for a while? Like, you know, do we all have to be like killing it and creating the next great disturbing thing? And where's the space for like, where's the space to be and to allow our identity to not be based on that? Like, oh, what do you do? Oh, I'm just being. Versus like, I'm building the next big platform that's going to, right? You know.
Well, I think my way to navigate that is, it's not about what we do or what any one of us wants. It's what we can help our customers with. I guess for a business, at least, that's how I think about it. And so it's whoever you serve, right? So for us, like my wife and I actually do that thought experiment. We do a thought experiment where we imagine we're running a bed and breakfast and what it would be like to,
in like Vermont or something?
Yeah, just somewhere random, but like what it would be like to have 10 patrons come in and be obsessed every day with giving those 10 people the most incredible experience and the most amazing evening, and having it be something they remember 5-10 years from now. And we both get excited about part of that, and then the truth is both of us conclude we wouldn't be happy doing that as a long-term focus, because we love, and I love, and she loves in her own journey. She's also in tech.
She's at, is she Better?
Startups. Yeah, she's at a company called Better Up.
Yeah, he was here earlier.
Eddie was here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my wife runs people at Better Up, if you guys heard him speak. So also a very mission-driven company. But what really excites me is the privilege I have in Gusto context to go help a lot more companies. Like every year, 40% of businesses in the US get fined for incorrectly doing their payroll taxes. Like I'm excited that we're helping 60,000. It annoys me that there's a couple 100,000 more that if they were using Gusto would not have that fine. And so I think that's where at least my drive, passion, motivation, why I'm not anywhere.
But won't there
done.
always going to be somebody, though, who's getting fined for something? The government will make sure of it, I'm sure.
Well, we want to fix that. I mean, entrepreneurs have to be inherently optimistic. I believe that we can make a dent in that. We can make that better. We can help millions of companies. I mean, we had the audacity as 3 people in a bedroom to believe that we could go up against a company like ADP worth $50 billion and do something we had never done before. I think we've made some progress in 5-6 years. We have a ton more to go do. But that's what drives me. And I hope to do it for many, many decades. It really feels like a gift. I would do this for free, honestly. But I also really couldn't care less when I'm 90 if my name is associated with it. It's not about me. It's just really fun to fix stuff. And I feel like we have this opportunity to go fix a big problem for a lot of people. And I actually really enjoy doing that.
That's great.
But there are trade-offs. I mean, it is a lot of time. It is a lot of focus. But I'm happy to make that deliberate choice.
Yeah, and I get the sense that like if you feel like there's somebody who has an issue or a challenge and you can remedy that or you can like reduce that friction for them, you just get great joy and satisfaction. And to feel like there's other people helping you reduce pain or reduce like challenges in a certain area, like that really feeds you.
Yeah, nothing frustrates me more than like pain. Especially self-inflicted if it's something that is a frustration or a communication problem. But 2 things give me joy. One is helping customers, and we measure things like NPS and customer satisfaction to know are we on the right track and are we actually helping them and making their life better. And then the second would be, I guess, related more to team. If it's just really cool to see someone on the team do something they never thought they could do, like seeing someone break through a barrier or a block, or even being a part of that in a small way, or catalyzing a company to help someone do that. It's just really fun to have exposure to that. Yeah,
and so this is the last question, but like there's a lot of, I mean, it's hard to kind of maybe define ego, but there's a lot of bravado, let's say, within Silicon Valley, like how big your company is, how the net worth is, and you seem to not have caught that disease, if you will. How do you keep yourself on task? How do you kind of stay, not let's say egoless, but how do you kind of like stay connected to the purpose versus getting caught in, oh, we could sell this, or we could make this, or like, because it feels like that energy can be really strong in any business, and particularly in Silicon Valley, like there's this like continual, almost like hunger for like, kind of like more. So I'm wondering, how do you help yourself stay aligned with like, we're a service-oriented company, we need to stay connected to that?
Well, first off, I hang out with you. But yeah, I think on a day-to-day basis, it ties to who you spend time with. I mean, I spend time with customers. We hire people to Gusto who have service mindset, derive equal joy that I do from hearing a small business owner say, you've saved me this amount of time or money. And so I'm around people that share that philosophy. I try to get out of the echo chamber and interact with other perspectives. And then, I think in some ways, it really shouldn't be that hard. It's kind of maybe weird to say that, but it feels like acting upon your values, acting upon your core philosophy should be something we all aspire to do.
Yeah.
And, you know, I have a family that raised me in a way that views those things as very important, and so if anyone ever sees me straying from that, send me a note, you know, tell me. But I think it's something we all have the potential to actually be distracted by. Is kind of this idea of benchmarking, comparison. You know, even as a business, we look at competitive landscape. We like to understand what's happening, but we like to think about how do we compare against our potential, not against someone else.
Right.
And that's something that I just keep reminding myself of.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So we're out of time, but I want to thank you, and I just say it's really refreshing to see somebody in a kind of like a fast-growing, I don't know if you still consider yourself a startup, but startup.
Oh, we are a startup, yes, and we are hiring too.
Fast-growing startup. Yeah, and if you haven't checked out the service and you need the service, it's awesome. We've used it. If you haven't, just to be asking the questions that you're asking. And I do think it's a little weird to have a shoeless office with 500 people, but I also think it could be kind of sweet, right? Just like, why do we need shoes? And are people a little more humble without their shoes on, right? Or a little softer, or a little more vulnerable? But I love the questions you're asking, and I love the things that you're doing, and I love the service-oriented approach, and I wish there was more people like yourself. And I hope that there is another generation coming that is asking similar questions.
If I have, I mean, again, just to close it, and really grateful for the invitation, if I have an optimistic perspective, given where we are today, and given the power and the leverage being centralized in this ecosystem called Silicon Valley, having grown up here my whole life, there is a core that remains the same throughout any part of the cycle, up or down. And you know, I feel honored to count us in that, and there are others, where it is really just all about, can you fix something? And if it's a big problem, then it's a big business opportunity. And can you do it in a way you're proud of? And that's the part of Silicon Valley I most admire, respect. It's not a zero-sum game. You give help to others as they've helped you. We've had many people help us over the years. And I remain as excited and convinced that that is still the core of Silicon Valley. There's a lot of fluff that comes and goes as kind of cycle goes up and down. But I remain optimistic that the core of it can stay that way.
Great. Thank you. Thanks so much.